Tyler McVeigh was just 17 when he climbed from the grim streets of Norris Green to become Liverpool's youngest drug kingpin, a boy whose empire was built on cocaine, betrayal, and blood. But behind the flash and power lurked a harsh truth. Every throne made from corpses eventually crumbles from within. This is the story of Tyler's rise, his ruthless reign, and the ruin waiting at the edge of the empire he fought so hard to build. Norris Green sat on the edge of Liverpool like a forgotten corner, its streets lined with cracked pavements, tired council houses, and the quiet hum of lives lived hard. It was the kind of place where ambition rarely stretched past the postcode, where hope was thin and futures were often shorter than they should be. Tyler McVeigh was born into this world in the dead of winter, to a teenage mother and a father who disappeared before his name made it onto the birth certificate. He grew up fast, not out of choice, but out of necessity. His childhood was shaped by silence, absent adults, unpaid bills, and an estate that spoke in glances instead of words. At primary school, he was the kid with second-hand shoes and bruises he wouldn't explain. By the time he was 10, he knew which shops let you steal and which ones didn't, which corners were watched by CCTV and which ones weren't. His mom worked double shifts cleaning offices, barely scraping enough to feed them. She loved him, but love didn't pay gas bills. Tyler understood that, and the streets understood him. By 12, he was hanging around the older boys outside the chip shop, laughing too loud, pretending he belonged. They noticed him, not for his size, but for his silence. He didn't talk too much, didn't beg to be liked. That earned him a test. Run a small package to the next block over, no questions asked. He did it without blinking. The package was coke. He knew they all did. But he didn't care. That one run turned into a second, then a third. Every drop earned him a note in his pocket, and a little more respect on the estate. The money was nothing at first, enough for sweets, a haircut, or a new hoodie. But for a boy who had grown up with nothing, even pocket change felt like power. And power was addictive. He started skipping school, making deliveries, watching how the older lads moved, talked, and stayed alive. He soaked it in like a sponge. By the time most kids his age were studying for GCSEs, Tyler had already learned the one rule that mattered where he came from. If you want to be someone in Norris Green, you either play the game or the game plays you. By the time Tyler hit 15, he was no longer just another kid on the estate. He was an earner. His face still carried the softness of youth, but his eyes had hardened. The older boys who once used him for small runs now handed him bigger bags, thicker envelopes, and real responsibility. He wasn't just trusted, he was relied on. And in a world built on fear and suspicion, that meant everything. Tyler operated like a machine, no mistakes, no excuses. He never dipped into the product, never missed a drop, never got caught. That kind of discipline didn't go unnoticed. His days started at noon and stretched deep into the night. He moved quietly between postcodes, dropping wraps into letterboxes, behind bins, under park benches. Each route was memorized, each handoff clean. It wasn't glamorous cold nights, dirty stairwells, police lurking, but the money was real. He no longer relied on burner phones passed down from others. He had his own line, his own territory, and runners of his own, just a year or two younger, desperate for a taste of what he had. His appearance changed with his income. Gone were the charity shop hoodies and worn-out trainers. Now it was Nike tech, fresh crepes, gold chains. He never flashed it too loud, but just enough that people noticed. Respect followed him. Fear, too. Teachers gave up trying to bring him back to class. They saw the signs, the late arrivals, the stench of weed, the disinterest. But no one had the energy to fight the tide. His mom asked questions at first, but Tyler always had answers, lies coated in charm and backed by cash. She wanted to believe him, needed to. The Reapers, the gang that ran most of North Liverpool's supply chain, saw Tyler's potential. He wasn't just another street kid hungry for money. He was sharp, calculating, quiet. They sent him on graft trips out of town, where demand was high and police were soft. He traveled to Wigan, then Preston, even as far as Carlisle. Each journey made him richer, more connected, more dangerous. The line between teenage dealer and criminal entrepreneur blurred quickly. Tyler had found his path, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't surviving. He was winning, or so he thought. Bonfire night lit up Liverpool with color and chaos, but for Tyler McVeigh, it marked the beginning of something darker. That evening, while fireworks cracked above Norris Green, a stash house he'd been using in Clubmore was targeted. A petrol bomb was thrown through the kitchen window, turning the bottom floor into an inferno. Tyler had been upstairs, weighing gear and sorting bundles. Smoke filled the hallway before he even smelled it. Most would have panicked, fled through a window, or begged for help. Tyler didn't flinch. He grabbed the nearest weapon, a rusted machete, hidden under a mattress, and kicked his way out through the back. Two figures were waiting outside, masked up, ready to finish the job. Without hesitation, he ran at them. He didn't swing the blade, he didn't need to. Just the sight of him charging through flames, screaming like a wild animal, was enough. They bolted. He chased one halfway down the alley before stopping. The fire crackled behind him, his breath came heavy. His heart pounded, and for the first time, he realized people feared him. The reapers were impressed. News traveled fast on the estate. A teenage dealer defending his turf with a blade. That wasn't common. Tyler didn't just survive the attack, he turned it into legend. The gang gave him more territory, bigger shipments, and something else. A firearm, a Glock, tucked into a shoebox, and handed to him like a rite of passage. They told him it was just for protection, but deep down everyone knew what that really meant. Tyler embraced it. He carried the gun everywhere. At parties, on drops, even when visiting his mom. He started walking differently, slower, more deliberate. People stepped aside. They started calling him Young T, a name that stuck. It appeared in graffiti, in Snapchat stories, whispered in school corridors by kids who once ignored him. But the firebomb wasn't random. It was a warning from a rival crew operating out of Toxteth. Tyler had been moving too fast, climbing too high. He'd crossed invisible lines, stepped on the wrong toes. The attack wasn't just about drugs, it was about sending a message. Tyler received it, loud and clear, but he didn't back down. He doubled up. More drops, more soldiers, more guns. The war had started, and Tyler wasn't planning to lose. With territory came power, and with power came enemies. Tyler McVeigh was no longer just a name in the system. He was a rising figure in Liverpool's underworld. By 16 he had his own crew, 4 young lads he'd brought up from the streets. All loyal, all hungry. They handled the pickups, managed the burners, and watched his back. But in this world, loyalty only lasted as long as the money flowed, and Tyler was about to learn that nothing in the game stayed clean for long. It started small. Missing notes from a drop. Excuses that didn't add up. Runners showing up late or looking nervous. Tyler had a gut feeling something was off. Then came the final blow. A re-up short by nearly $2,000. The money had gone through Kyle, one of Tyler's oldest mates, a kid he'd grown up with since year 7. They'd been tight, shared meals, slept on the same sofas, even bled together during scraps. But friendship didn't matter when money disappeared. Tyler asked no questions, no warnings. He called in a favor from a hitter in Anfield. A man who didn't ask why, just when, 2 days later, Kyle's body was found under a footbridge in Stanley Park, stabbed 18 times, stripped of everything but a pair of socks. The city didn't blink, just another dead teenager in a city drowning in cocaine and silence. But Tyler felt it. Not guilt, never that. But something colder. A piece of him had switched off that night. He'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. He'd spilled blood, not just for business, but to send a message. The message was clear: betrayal equals death. After that, his circle shrunk. Meetings moved underground. Orders were spoken, not texted. His phone was now kept in a microwave when not in use. Paranoia disguised as caution. The Reapers respected him more than ever, but they also kept their distance. Tyler was becoming his own boss, and not everyone liked that. Police began paying attention, task forces were formed, surveillance increased. But Tyler kept one step ahead. No fingerprints, no face on cameras, no direct ties to the bodies dropping. Still, for every move he made up the ladder, the fall below grew deeper. And now, blood was on his hands. There was no way back. With Liverpool under his thumb, Tyler wanted more. Street-level deals weren't enough. He was tired of watching older men take the biggest cuts while he took the biggest risks. The money was good, but not life-changing, not the kind of money that bought real freedom. Tyler had ambitions far beyond Norris Green. He didn't want to be a dealer. He wanted to be a supplier. The man behind the curtain, the one who made the rules. And to do that, he needed a new plug. Through a cousin who'd done time in Spain, Tyler was introduced to a contact in Amsterdam. The Dutch supplier worked with Albanians who controlled major coke routes across Europe. It was risky, cross-border deals brought heat and higher stakes, but Tyler didn't hesitate. He flew out under a fake name, stayed in a cheap hotel, and sat down in a smoky back room with men twice his age. They didn't care about his age, they cared about volume, and Tyler was ready to move serious weight. Within a month, furniture shipments started arriving in Kirkdale, couches, dressers, even bed frames, each one hiding bricks of cocaine packed in plastic and grease. The operation grew fast. Tyler hired drivers, rented warehouses and cleaned cash through a shell company registered under a mate's name. He was bringing in more than £70,000 a week. And with that kind of money came more power, more respect and more enemies. He started moving differently. He rarely showed his face in public. Meetings happened in moving cars or behind shuttered garages. His phone changed weekly. He had someone on payroll just to monitor police activity online, but the cracks were starting to show. He was snorting more than he used to. His temper was shorter. He stopped trusting people, even his own crew. Everyone was a potential rat. Everyone had a price. Despite the paranoia, Tyler couldn't resist flaunting his success. He posted cryptic images on social media, Rolex watches, champagne bottles, luxury cars with blurred plates. He thought he was being smart, hiding behind filters and private accounts. But police noticed, rivals noticed. So did the Dutch. And in the drug game, when too many people notice, it's only a matter of time before someone makes a move. Tyler had climbed higher than anyone expected. But now, the fall was looming. Tyler's empire looked solid from the outside. Cash flowing, product moving, loyalty tight. But inside it was rotting. The first crack came from within his own crew. Reese, his second in command, had been with him since the early days. Smart, sharp, and ruthless when needed. He handled logistics, oversaw shipment just 2 people. Every drop was personally verified. Every call recorded. But the damage had already been done. His operation had been exposed. The walls were closing in, and he knew it. The empire wasn't just bleeding, it was beginning to collapse. In the middle of Tyler's world of violence and power, Naya was a rare light. She was strong, fearless, and unlike anyone Tyler had ever known. Their connection went beyond the usual street romance. Naya was sharp, wise beyond her years, and fiercely loyal. She didn't just stand by Tyler, she became part of his inner circle, sitting in on meetings with trusted lieutenants and helping him make decisions that shaped the future of his empire. To Tyler, Naya was more than a girlfriend. She was the only person who could calm the storm inside him. But beneath her tough exterior, Nia carried her own scars. Her brother had been killed years earlier, caught in the crossfire of gang violence linked to the Grim Reapers, the same gang Tyler had once worked for. That loss left a deep wound in her heart, a mix of anger, grief, and a thirst for justice. Yet she tried to believe Tyler was different from those who had destroyed her family. The fragile trust between them shattered when Naya uncovered the truth about Kyle. The boy who had been Tyler's closest friend, the one who was murdered in Stanley Park, had died because of Tyler's orders. Naya's world twisted with betrayal and heartbreak. The man she loved had become part of the cruelty she despised. That night, everything changed. In a moment of desperation and rage, Naya confronted Tyler. She pulled a Glock and pressed it against his temple. Time seemed to freeze. The gunshot echoed in the silence, but the weapon jammed. The bullet never left the barrel. Naya fled, leaving Tyler stunned and alone. Tyler didn't chase her. He sat in the darkness, the weight of everything crashing down. The empire he built with blood and fear now had cracks that no money or muscle could fix. The streets whispered the story. Young T, the fearless Kingpin, vulnerable and broken. From that night on, Tyler's world shifted. It wasn't just the police or rival gangs he had to fear. It was the betrayal of the one person he had trusted most. The love that once gave him strength had become the trigger that could destroy everything. And Tyler knew the fall was coming. Tyler's world was closing in fast. The police had been watching for months, but now their grip was tightening. Undercover officers slipped into his network, posing as buyers and runners, blending into the streets like ghosts. The safe houses where he once felt untouchable were no longer secure. Surveillance cameras tracked his every move, and phone taps recorded every whispered conversation. Tyler's paranoia grew heavier with each passing day. No one was safe, not even his closest allies. Despite the risks, Tyler refused to slow down. The operation needed to keep running. The cash had to keep flowing. The Dutch shipments were still coming, and the dealers on the streets expected product. But the pressure was suffocating. His nights became restless, filled with nightmares of raids, betrayals, and betrayal worse than death. He barely slept. Every knock at the door sent his heart racing. Every siren brought a flash of panic. The reapers started to grow uneasy. Tyler's erratic behavior, his unpredictable moods, and his increasing isolation made people nervous. Rumors spread that he was on edge, that he trusted no one, that he was cracking under the strain. His enemies smelled blood. Rival crews sensed vulnerability and began making moves, testing his defenses with small raids and intimidation. Tyler's world became a constant game of survival. He switched phones multiple times a week, changed routes on a whim, and met contacts in new, secret locations. He trusted no one but himself, and a handful of loyal soldiers who had proven themselves over years of hardship. But even they weren't immune to fear. Some started disappearing, quietly slipping away or refusing calls. One rainy evening, the inevitable happened. Police raided one of Tyler's warehouses in Kirkdale. They seized kilos of cocaine, thousands in cash, and weapons. More arrests followed. His operation was bleeding, and the walls were closing in tighter than ever. Tyler was forced underground. Safe houses went dark, phones stopped ringing, and the streets grew quieter. The empire he built on risk, ruthlessness, and fear was crumbling, and at the center of it all, Tyler knew the final chapter of his reign was approaching, whether he was ready or not. Tyler disappeared into the shadows after the raid, vanishing from the streets he once ruled. He moved from safe house to safe house, constantly changing locations to avoid police surveillance and rival gangs looking to take advantage of his weakened state. The freedom he once chased felt like a distant memory. His empire was fractured, his crew scattered, and his name once feared whispered with doubt. Isolation weighed heavily on him. Without the constant adrenaline of running the business, Tyler's mind spiraled. He wrestled with the choices he'd made. The blood spilled, and the people lost along the way. Guilt wasn't something he was used to, but it crept in, a persistent shadow reminding him of the price of power. He was no longer the unstoppable Kingpin. He was a hunted boy, haunted by the ghosts of his past. Despite it all, Tyler wasn't ready to give up. He started plotting quietly, reaching out to old contacts, trying to piece together a way back. But the game had changed. The police were tighter, the rivals more aggressive, and trust was nearly impossible to find. His reputation, once his strongest weapon, was now a liability. Many believed he was finished, just another statistic swallowed by Liverpool's ruthless underworld. Then came the unexpected. Nya returned. She found him in a dingy flat on the outskirts of the city, bruised but alive. Their reunion was tense, filled with unspoken words, regret and the weight of shared history. Nya wasn't the same girl who had fled months before. She carried scars too and a cold determination. Together they hatched a plan not to rebuild the empire but to escape it. They talked about leaving Liverpool behind, starting over somewhere new, far from the blood and betrayal. But Tyler knew the truth. Running away wasn't simple. The enemies he'd made wouldn't forget. The police wouldn't stop hunting. The past never stays buried. Still, for the first time in years, hope flickered. Not for power or money, but for something harder to find, freedom. But freedom, Tyler learned, came with a price. And sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought within. The final days of Tyler McVeigh's reign were a blur of tension and danger. The promise of escape with Nya gave him a flicker of hope, but the reality was harsh. The streets of Liverpool don't forget, and enemies lurk behind every corner, waiting for the moment to strike. His name, once whispered with fear, was now a target on his back. Trust was a currency he no longer possessed. As the plan to leave took shape, Tyler found himself surrounded by ghosts, betrayals, lost friends, and the weight of all the blood he'd spilled. The empire he built from the cracks of Norris Green was crumbling, but surrendering wasn't an option. The idea of disappearing wasn't just about survival, it was about redemption. Somewhere deep down, Tyler wanted to believe he could start over, that the boy who once ran those streets could find a life beyond violence. But fate had other plans. One cold evening, as Tyler and Nya prepared to leave the city, a trap was sprung. A rival gang tipped off the police, and officers swarmed the flat where they were hiding. Tyler fought, desperate, fierce but outnumbered. In the chaos, Nya was caught in the crossfire. Hit by a stray bullet, Tyler cradled her as she slipped away, her blood staining the floor of the only home he'd ever known. The loss shattered him. The boy who had risen from nothing to become Liverpool's youngest drug kingpin was left broken and alone. Arrested shortly after, Tyler faced a long sentence. His empire was gone, buried under evidence and testimonies. The streets moved on, new names rising where his had fallen. Behind bars, Tyler had time to reflect on choices, on loyalty, on the cost of power. He realized that every empire built on coke and corpses eventually crumbles from within. His story became a cautionary tale whispered in Liverpool's alleys, a reminder that even the fiercest rise can end in ruin. Tyler McVeigh's legacy wasn't just about drugs or violence, it was about a boy trapped by his circumstances, who fought for respect and control, only to learn that the price of that fight was more than he could bear. And in the silence of his cell, the echoes of Norris Green